What if some of your favorite games, even from decades ago, had the graphics of a modern, high-end game engine? Well, that's exactly what these modders were thinking when they decided to re-envision Black Mesa with ray trace lighting and a new material system, massively updating a game experience which I guess originated almost 3 decades ago. Let's check out this incredible RTX mod and the evolution of Half-Life while we're at it. So, this is an RTX remix mod for Black Mesa, which is the very popular fan remake of Half-Life. And while the RTX mod only covers a small slice of the full game so far, it's a remarkable proof of concept and a pretty staggering achievement considering it was made by just a handful of people. It was released as an entry in last year's RTX Remix competition, officially hosted by Nvidia. And while it didn't win the top prize, the effort put in was massive and it absolutely deserves a look. Now, if you were going to boot up Half-Life today, maybe for the first time ever, well, you might not be met with the most straightforward process because there's so many ways to play that classic experience. There's the original 1998 launch version of the game, the official Source remaster that Valve released back in 2004 and all the various patches, and then even the 25th anniversary edition from a couple years back that Valve put out with sweeping quality of life changes and minor content tweaks. And then of course there's Black Mesa, which is not a Valve-made remaster, so it's not the official remaster, and it takes some artistic liberties that you may or may not like depending on how much of a pure experience you want. And now we can even play Black Mesa with this visual mod on top to remaster the already remastered experience. And comparing, say, 3 versions of Half-Life to one another, it's kind of insane just how much of a leap Black Mesa is from the original game. The textures, models, lighting, and overall look of the game is much higher fidelity, and it's really impressive considering that both are running on different branches of essentially the same engine. Now, of course, Black Mesa had the massive benefit of having the original material to create its updated experience, and they also were aiming for essentially much more powerful computers by the time it released. Even so, it's still a very impressive experience, but ray tracing really does help to update the visuals to a point where your eye just tends to accept the realness of the environment much more quickly. The bathroom and the locker could almost look like real life if you squint a little bit. Ray tracing just solves a lot of the technical issues that the traditional rendering systems of Black Mesa are held back by. Character shadows are actual shadows and not just dark blobs on the ground. And a really cool thing about RTX mods is that they don't require digging into the engine files in traditional modding senses. It's actually quite easy to get it set up with a game and do whatever you want to both great and awful effects, which I have done in the past. And Remix just isn't some sort of magic button that makes the game look ray traced and much better. A proper Remix project actually requires replacing a lot of the game's assets with physically based materials, textures, and models, tuning how these things respond to light, and then relighting the entire game so that the ray trace lighting looks realistic and intentional. It's actually quite a lot of work and requires a huge amount of knowledge in just the art of lighting itself and time. And from what I've seen, not everything in Black Mesa has been replaced, which is why there's still some things that look low resolution or like they're not interacting with the light quite properly. In other areas though, even ones past the point that this mod covers, the ray tracing still adds a ton of depth and character to the game that feels in line with Valve's original vision. When things go sideways and the hallways are exploding, the darkness caused by the broken lights actually looks quite dark and realistic. It tends to fit the horror aspect of the game more appropriately. Something that really stood out to me were the additional reflections, especially on the glass surfaces. It's actually hard to tell in both the original version of Half-Life and Black Mesa that the tram even has glass in its windows, but in the Remix mod, the glass surfaces all reflect the world accurately, more or less anyway. There's still limits on how many bounces of the light rays you'll see, which affects the fidelity and stuff, but the point is that you can literally see the massive doors of the facility closing behind you in the reflection of the glass, which is so cool. This glass wall partitioning the lab space from the hallway also looks incredible, and it really gives that cold and smooth impression of actual glass. Some areas of the game where there just aren't room lights at all are actually quite dark in ways that you don't often see in games. For example, the iconic test chamber. Well, its light lighting is basically a massive OSHA violation. It's so dim you need to use the flashlight just to see. But there also doesn't seem to be a ton of actual lights in this room, so it just feels more realistic and less like there's a bunch of invisible lights placed in the scene like the original Black Mesa. Sure, it's not accurate to the original vision, but it's definitely accurate to the light sources, and it gives it a totally different vibe and sort of a creepy sense of realism. Now, unfortunately, the unfinished proof of concept nature of this mod means, well, it's certainly not launch ready. It is very demanding to run right now. Without upscaling and frame gen, I was getting like 12 FPS on a pretty decent PC. A PC that can run other RTX Remix projects much faster. Clearly, there's a ton of optimization work that the devs just didn't get around to, but that's not unexpected since it is just a proof of concept. It's also running on both the 1.0 launch build of Black Mesa, which has its own bugs, and a beta version of Remix that doesn't include a lot of enhancements and improvements that the latest build offers, which actually probably would speed this project up quite a bit. Now, currently, RTX Remix is better suited for remastering rather than remaking a game because it just runs atop a game rather than changing any of the core code. This makes it much quicker to get into a modding project and makes it a bit more artist-friendly than people needing to recompile the game code itself. It can also be a good thing for people looking for a more pure experience where only the visuals have been changed but not any of the actual game mechanics. And I like updates like this, and even like Black Mesa that did change a lot of the original game. They serve as not objective improvements, but just different interpretations of what the original experience could have been. And I think a lot of these projects have demonstrated that, at least when done well, they can be transformative without making sweeping, subjective changes to the heart or soul of a game. There's plenty of debate online as to what people should play if they're going to play through Half-Life for the first time, or what the proper definitive version is or the best version is. We'll probably never solve that debate, but if somebody applied the care and effort shown in this mod and other remix proof of concepts, I think we could get closer than we ever have before to an experience that would both respect the original concept of the game but update it enough to attract modern players to try and experience it or get some of the feelings that the original experience had if you played it way back in 1998. Now, I've been pretty interested in this remix technology. I did a deep dive into it for the Half-Life 2 RTX project, which is incredibly impressive as well. It's sort of the ultimate example of just how far this technology can be pushed, and it's also being handled by an actual game dev studio, which is part of why it looks so darn good compared to a lot of the other sort of hobby style projects out there. I highly recommend you check out that video next. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.